All right, so we're going to get started. Simon Walsh, the Closed Network Privacy Podcast. If you guys haven't listened to it, it's a great podcast. It's one of my favorites. He's here to tell us about the many depressing things that are happening in this country right now. So please give it up for Simon.
So normally I drink beers on the podcast, but I've got a 2-hour drive home, so I'm not going to do that tonight. So thanks for coming out. Thanks for having me up. It's great to meet people in real life because most of the people I interact with are online, and that is, it's sometimes can be a lonely experience. So yeah, I'm going to go ahead and get into this presentation. I've got a lot packed in here. I'm going to try to get it all condensed down. So if I run over anything, we can come back to it in the questions because there's a lot of legislation that I track online, both in the US as well as in the EU. They tend to mimic each other in a lot of ways and borrow, language even from, proposed, mandates to bills, and there are differences. Of course, here in the United States, we have different states that create state laws and we have federal laws, and it's kind of a mess. And so I'm going to get into a little bit of that and then also kind of some things we can do to circumvent that. So this is the slide. Simon, nice to meet you all. Let's see if my, let's see, am I on the wrong? There we go. There we go. Okay, cool. So who the heck am I? I'm just a regular guy. I have some sort of neurotic reason to deep dive into privacy and security topics, have for a very long time. And I started the podcast just as a way to, especially during COVID, just to kind of start getting a lot of these ideas out. I've been in the Linux and open source community for the last 20 years. And a podcast is an easy platform to distribute content on. So yeah, I have a show. There's actually 2 podcasts now. We're doing a mini dispatch, which is kind of like quick coverage, usually about 15 minutes long. And then the regular podcast is kind of long form content. I have guests on. I've interviewed Matt Hill from Start OS like 2 years ago. So I need to get him back for 040, as well as just kind of like giving people tools that they can use and implement just a little bit each day, each week, each month. And so yeah, that's pretty much that. So if you want to connect with me, these also will be at the end. The best ways are on Signal or SimpleX. I'll talk a little bit about that later. Email, the website. I do have 2 live trackers. One is for the EU chat control legislation that keeps morphing into different things, as well as the US age verification laws and the new federal laws. So yeah, you can check it out. Hit me on X on the Musk platform if you want. So I'm going to kind of just step through 5 different phases so that we're going to talk about the ugly and the scary and dystopian stuff, but then kind of like some ways that you can start implementing tools and techniques and just also lifestyle changes. I know everyone shops, has to buy things. And, as we were talking earlier about just what's the first question out of everyone's mouth is, what's your phone number? What's your phone number? What's your phone number? Because they want to put you in the system. And then they tweak out when you don't want to give it to them. And it's just like this conditioning over time that we're supposed to give all this information out to any corporation, but yet you wouldn't give that information to a stranger on the street. Why do we have this trust with the system? So I'm equating this to a door because we all live probably in some kind of dwelling, a house, apartment, townhome, condo, whatever. Usually, especially in Denver, I'd imagine you lock those doors at night, windows, maybe even have security alarms. You have cameras. You have all these different things to secure your stuff and your persons. And that door is kind of always open in the digital sense. So I'm just using the door as an analogy, but just picture a big ass hole in your house, and like that's the digital version of this door expanding, and we're going to get into that. So this is kind of what we're going to go through here. So the door, there's my slide for the door. All right, so right now there are 26 states that have passed or proposed age verification laws, and they vary, right? We also have 4 App Store, and then right now 1 federal proposed law. So I'm just going to read off my notes because it's a lot to keep track of, and I'm updating this all the time. So roughly 26 states now require an age check to reach certain websites. And then in Missouri, which will be the 27th, version lands in 9 days, which will impose a $10,000 a day or up to $250,000 if a minor actually reaches the content. We're talking about generally adult sites and that kind of stuff. So a lot of people in Texas, right, if you go to Pornhub, YouPorn, whatever your flavor is, you are forced to KYC yourself with a third-party vendor, which no idea what happens to that data, eventually will be breached at some point. And that proves that you're over the age of 18 to enter the site. A lot of people in Texas are like, well, F that, I'll just fire up a VPN, bounce out of Colorado, New Mexico, whatever. I go to the site, problem solved. So, VPNs have oftentimes been a way for us to get content overseas or just to not have your ISP scanning everything that you're doing, because they do, and they sell that information. All your DNS queries go through your ISP, they see it all. So these are things that I'm tracking right now. 4 states have gone up another layer and put the duty on the App Store. So that was a previous slide. Texas, Utah, Louisiana, Alabama, and Texas is live right now, which I just mentioned. And in July, the Supreme Court declined to vacate that. So there's a stay while it's being litigated. That could take years. We have no idea. Plus, a lot of these states are just seeing what other states do, because once you have precedent, then you basically rule on that for case law. So federally, there's one more package. It's a doozy. I have a totally separate piece of paper just to keep track of this stuff. And it is known as HR 7757, which is the KIDS Act, which is not a single act. It's not a single bill. It's a bundle, which contains the Kids Online Safety Act, the Screen Title, or the Screen Act, COPA 2.0, updating the Children's Privacy Law, plus the SafeBots Act, which is like chatbot disclosures, and the FTC Data Broker Registry. So these things will come into play in a minute, why I'm just kind of briefly trying to run through this stuff. So basically, if you're in any of these states and you're not contacting your congressman, this is also Colorado is in that as well, and that's at the OS layer. California had AB 18856, which excludes Linux and open source because there is no central authority to go after, right? Because this is a mandate, or this is a law, but the repercussions are huge as far as the fines. And so we're seeing Meta right now in federal court in Oakland trying to fight back against this, not because they give a crap about kids. This is not about kids at all. It's about money. Who's going to pay for it? Who's going to own the liability? So that's kind of the whole thing. So starting with like the top layer, referring to the VPN earlier, is kind of like the checkpoint. And that, just keep checkpoint in your mind, because the checkpoint, just think about going through the airport, right? You go through security. If you're going international, you're going to go through, customs or something like that. I'm going to take this off for a second because I'm a little taller than the mic. So there we go. So I like the checkpoint analogy because it kind of gives you like, okay, it's a stopping thing. Papers, please, verify yourself. And up till now, we've been able to avoid that with the VPNs. So now we're moving to the App Store layer. Next is the operating system layer. And then we're moving into DNS registry. There was a domain in Texas, which VeriSign just wiped off the face of the planet. So, we don't have to get into the nitty gritty, but then we have inference. Inference is, think of it as you should have known, the federal mandate of like, well, this user was on your platform, you should have known what their age was. So there's these age signals that are created under 13, 13 to 16, 16 to 18, and above 18. And so some of these technologies are trying to use signal-based, like what's the age bracket of the visitor or the user coming to the site using the app, or the platform. And now we're getting all the way to the operating system. If you're running iOS on iOS 27, which is beta 5 right now, they are already doing that. So if you're using even like Claude, something that you would think that's not like adult content, it's gonna be asked to verify your age. It's gonna do the attestation with Apple. Same with Google. Google's already rolled that out. So this is done when you create your account, you log in, you tie payment method to it, right? So think about all these different checkpoints that are basically saying, yes, this person's of this age, so on and so forth. So the left side we're already kind of familiar with, and this is going to combine things like your transactions, it's building these profiles, and of course, mostly for marketing purposes, keep marketing in your mind. And then for age inference, this is we always need to know. We always need to know who you are, who you're talking to, what you're buying, what you're looking at, what you're browsing, what you're uploading. Everything's getting scanned. Just assume it's getting scanned. And then that's kind of like, well, how do we do that? Right? And that's why all these companies are in litigation right now. So this is just a quick reference to the HR 7757. There aren't any ways to do that easily, right? They're kind of pushing back and saying, well, if you don't have a way, you got to figure it out. Meta, Google, Apple, you got to figure out how to figure out what these ages are. Well, they don't really want to be in the business of doing that. So everyone's pushing back up. Well, because Meta is not an operating system. Right? It's just their apps. So they're really an ad network, but they want to push that up to the OS. And the OSs are like, well, shit, I don't want to, how are we going to manage this? By the way, both Google and Apple have spent hundreds of millions of dollars over the last decade doing incredible work with child, profiles on device. Fantastic job. So this is really a parenting issue, and pushing the parenting back on to the government and legislation, because they will make the decisions for people, right? So I'm not going to go too far into that, but like, why is this happening, right? So we have ALO, who's a owner of, I think, like Pornhub and a few other big sites. They want to push it to the OS. Hey, we don't want to pay for, it's a huge liability. What are we going to do? Store it? How long do we store it? What's the retention policy? Like, how do we know when they come back again to verify, right? We have to verify it based on the account or what, or every visit, because you don't have to be logged in. Okay, Meta is kind of the same way, but they're pushing down to the OS layer because they're not an operating system. And Google is trying to do it all from the beginning. And they're doing it through Google API and integrity checks for developers. They're doing it through API age verifications tied to the Google account. And this is this is not about children at all. And that's my whole point. So I want to get into the mesh, what the mesh looks like. So even just 10 years ago, you could buy a phone and you activate it and you start using it. But now you have this setup. So the OS is asking for your date of birth. It's tying your phone number and an email address, and your phone number for those database administrators, real low levels, a primary key, right? I know this is this person, and this person's been verified with Verizon or T-Mobile or whoever. You're going to give them your information. A lot of times they do a quick background or a credit check, that kind of stuff. And then it goes to the App Store. Now the App Store wants, you want an account with Google, you want an account with Apple, set up your email, set up your password, set up your payment method so you can do your in-store and app purchases and all that kind of fun stuff. So you're KYCing all the way through, and you haven't even really done anything just yet. You haven't even gone online. So you've got your card tied to it. Now you've got your carrier and Wi-Fi, and we're getting into the Wi-Fi stuff in a minute. And then there's you. You just set it up, and now it's transmitting all this information about you, known networks, and so on and so forth. So these are kind of like the main four platforms and like what they're kind of trying to do as far as the age bands between Google and Apple. Google is using what's called Google Play age signals. Apple's doing declared age range. Microsoft is basically a storefront, and they're using Yoti and Verify My Face and all this other stuff, which is just a honeypot for any breach. It's the thing that just irritates the crap out of me. You have all these kids, and I have two kids. I have two sons, and then I've got a boatload of nieces and nephews, and they're all in middle school to high school, and they're all carrying Chromebooks around. They all got Google accounts, and so from school, there's digital profiles being created on all of these kids, and now we're gonna have to do it with the OS layer and the face scanning too. By the way, if you're Middle Eastern, you're Black, you're identify as non-binary or whatever. Has a very high failure rate on detecting your age based on face. Google tried to do this about a year and a half ago and they're still rolling it out with YouTube. Based on the age of your account, what kind of content you watch, they actually guess your age, and they do it pretty accurately. Even your comments and what you like and all that kind of stuff, what you linger on. So these things are important. With Linux, Systemd did implement an age field. There's a lot of there's controversy over that. We don't have to get into the weeds of that. That's probably its own talk. So yeah, it's bad. So then the carriers will identify you. You have payment trails and retail. I want to talk about retail. How many of you have a Sam's Club membership, Costco, right? So when you go in and you use your app, it's really convenient to do these, scan the stuff, pay, and just walk out the door. But when you use the app and you're doing the scan your stuff into the cart, it's on the back end, it's connecting to their Wi-Fi network, and there are Bluetooth beacons all around as well. You won't really see them. They don't stand out, but they're tracking you, for like, what does this person like to buy? What are the aisles they always go to every time they come here? But it's also keeping track of your MAC address for the next time you come in. And then it's tied to your receipts and the items that you bought. I know Sam's Club is where I go a lot. They have machines that can actually detect all the barcodes before you even get there. And half the time they're like, yeah, you're good. The other time they'll scan like 3 things and they're like, cool. You seem like, you're fine. So you have all these payment rails tied to the app on the phone, on their Wi-Fi network, MAC address recording. I mean, think of the amount of data, right? I mean, it's a lot of data. So, we were talking about Flock just a second ago. Has anybody heard of Leonardo? Yes, we have one person. So another one. Okay. Leonardo is a company that makes a product called Signal Trace. This is additional hardware. And Flock is the name, the household name, but there's Axon, there's Gentek, there's a shitload of companies that are all getting into this. Flock takes the most heat because they're the most prevalent probably, but especially with all the hot water they get into with their demos and all that fun stuff. So historically, we've been told, it's okay, bro. Like, we're just scanning your license plate. So that way, if there's an Amber Alert, we can find the kid. And everyone's like, well, I want you to find kids. Like, okay, like that would be shitty if you didn't. So we've been told, okay, license plate, timestamp, location. Seems fairly benign. You are out in public. Your tag is public on your car. Okay, what Signal Trace is doing is it's now detecting what's in your car. AirPods, smartwatch, right? Anything, AirTag, 12-year-old boy. Maybe there's an AirTag on the kid. Wi-Fi hotspots, laptops, tablets. Also, your car has a shitload of data that it's transmitting. You have informatics, you have, tire pressure monitor systems, RFID badge that you take to work every day and scan in, that's getting picked up. Now you're riding with your friend, riding around, different car, but they know that you're in it, right? And the whole thing is, we're not tracking people. That's what Flock, they're kind of saying, we're not tracking people, we're just tracking vehicles. Bullshit, they're tracking it all. And when you couple the Bluetooth, the IMEIs, and all that kind of stuff with that, it is full-blown 24/7 surveillance. So this is kind of the breakdown, right? In like one identity, you in the middle. So you have your carrier and your SIM, which is pinging in every cell tower, which it kind of needs to do that to get your messages. You got your payment rails, so especially tap to pay and all that kind of stuff. The OS and device, which you've already testified that your age and everything. The App Store. Now you layer in ALPR plus Signal Trace plus retail and Wi-Fi and all this other stuff. Flock is working with companies, private companies, to add even more Flock cameras, and they're doing it at a subsidy, right? And it just keeps expanding the network. And these things are meshed. I mean, do you remember probably a couple of years ago, Sidewalk, which Amazon rolled out for Ring cameras, where basically your Ring camera is now connected to everyone else's Ring camera and like sharing all this data. That's this like times like a billion, right? So it's bad. So coming back to like, why is this happening? And I'm a conspiracy therapist, so I like to think that it's something to do with that, and that's part of it. But really, for a lot of these companies participating in this is liability. How do we offload as much liability as ourselves? We don't want another Instagram fappening situation where everything got leaked and all the celebrities, nudie photos came out. We don't want those kinds of things to happen. It's too expensive. So what's the game plan? Well, we'll lobby to do cost shifting. So if you're a web provider, you're a service provider, an app creator, anything like that, especially, think about it. If you're a startup and you're working on a shoestring budget, your vibe code in your app, maybe it's got a little social aspect into it. Maybe people can post stuff. You got to think about this. You're going to have to do some sort of age verification for this. So yeah, you want someone else to pay for that. And then we go into the ad tech. Does anybody understand the difference as Microsoft and Apple and Google versus say like open source as far as companies go? We think of them as like software companies, but they're all ad tech companies. All of them. And every single one of them is selling ads. So that's a whole nother industry that's basically needs this information. There's compliance and identity and some other stuff that they have to. And then the last one, which nobody really talks about, when you signed up for Instagram in 2014 and you agreed to the terms and conditions and you start posting your content on the platform, you didn't know that down the road that content would be used for training data. And once those are in the model weights, you can't not even easily, they can't be removed. They're baked in. So that's another huge problem is that all this, yes, there's a lot of content that's just been stolen from everybody, and creators and artists and everything online and fed into these AI models, but also all of the social data is now turning into new training models, training data, which is also your shopping habits and all that kind of stuff, which is how these models get much more sophisticated. So we're going to talk about, let me skip this one. Okay, how many people have an email address? Okay, just about everybody. All right, what is an email address? So the funny thing about email, it's like 50 years old. It's a protocol, right? And we've all probably had different emails with different providers. If you're as deep in this as I am, you own your own domains. You probably have your own systems for creating email aliases so that you can move your email anywhere you want. But a lot of people have like Gmail, or maybe you're using Proton or To2Mail or something like that. But it's been around a long time and it still works and it works great. So this is just like one example of like protocols versus platforms. I talk about that a lot in the podcast, a lot. Protocols are something that nobody owns technically. I can't come after somebody. I can't come after the email protocol company because someone emailed a nudie pic, right? Or something like that. Versus if it's sent as a DM on WhatsApp or Instagram, it's in a platform. So this is kind of like where we talk about one owner, throat to choke, for the platform versus a protocol. There's no one to subpoena or go after if something was done on like Nostr. Well, we kind of know what their public key is, identity, but we don't really have anything else to go on. Nostr doesn't keep a record of it. There is no Nostr company. It's a protocol. So keep those two things in mind because that's going to kind of play into where we go from here as far as, oh, sorry, we're going backwards. Okay, so just a quick rundown, like decentralized comms, and these are just a few, right? There's tons of them out there, but just picked some. So you guys use Signal? A lot of Signal fans? Cool. Yes, I'm a huge Signal fan too. Now, Signal does collect metadata. There is a phone number registered to it, right? But the contents are encrypted. You can do disappearing messages, right? You can have ephemeral conversations. You have a conversation with a friend in your living room. You can kind of have the same thing, but there is a record that it happened. The difference, right? Versus, they don't know what you said. So we have Signal up here, right? And then SimpleX, which is really kind of actually pretty cool. It's still kind of not really, it doesn't have a big network effect, but you don't need anything. It generates a QR code. That's your identity. You can have multiple profiles. You can join chats with new profiles, or you can have a profile for friends and family and you have another profile, and it's all contained in one app. And you can even host your own SimpleX server. Shout out to StartOS, because I think they have a SimpleX implementation. And then we have Matrix and Briar, and there's Kutch, and there's other ones which don't rely on a server. Briar doesn't. Matrix does, but you can run your own Matrix server, right? So now that kind of adds some sovereignty back into your life. You are controlling it, but Matrix is a protocol, and people can use any number of apps they want, and they can be members of other servers, kind of like Discord, but more open. It has some issues, but it's pretty good overall. So I just kind of want to break down, versus, WhatsApp or iMessage or things that are centralized, owned by a platform. If you got deleted, if you broke some terms of service and they nuke your account, you're boned. You can't talk to anybody on there anymore, right? So that's kind of going back to the, owning your identity and where you are. So that kind of leads into the open standards, right? And we're talking earlier about a checkpoint, and most open standards are refusing to kind of like create a checkpoint. Even like a lot of these independent Linux distribution developers and stuff, half of them are just like, dude, we're not doing this age verification stuff. There might be lawsuits, great. Might be some case law that comes out of that. Systemd, when it shipped the age field, the maintainers refused to ship the policy engine. And the open governance didn't make it very feasible. And I think that's one of the reasons, I don't exactly know, but California AB 1856 explicitly exempted Linux and open source software systems from that, which is really important. And this is coming up on the 31st of this month, how that's going to be voted on. And California is really bad at a lot of things, but maybe that's a little bit better than even like we have in Colorado. If we can mimic that, it gives us a case when we're talking to congressional representatives, when we're talking to senators, people who are passing legislation. It's like, well, California did it. California did it. Like, we should do that too. Like, we need to have these exemptions. So now we're just going to kind of pop into the sovereignty. How am I doing on time? All right, 7:48. So have anyone heard of Graphene OS? A lot of hands. Okay, I'm not surprised. You guys are like, Liberty on the rocks and stuff. So Graphene OS is a great operating system. It's one I use. It's really the only option going forward. It's just a de-Googled Android. It uses open source, the Android, and then they layer in their own security and hardened memory allocation, and they sandbox other applications. And so you can run normal Google Play apps from the App Store, but everything is treated in like a sandbox. If you use Linux, kind of like a Flatpak. So it's kind of very contained and it can't jump out of there, which is a huge benefit. And you don't have to run Google Play, but most of us need some banking apps and whatever. But you can also create multiple profiles on there. And it's just a great alternative to iOS or stock Android. So that, on the sovereignty side, it's like tell you all the doom and gloom, but like, what are your options? This is a big option because your phone is the most personal computer you have. It's generally on you all the time, goes with you everywhere, do your banking, all your messaging, email often, all your meme downloading and all that stuff. So kind of a big deal. And on the desktop, we have, I have like some stuff up here. But if you're familiar with Graphene OS, you're probably familiar with Linux. Linux has come a long way, mostly in the last year and a half due to like the gaming industry and what Valve is doing with Steam and Arch Linux. And then you also have people like DHH running, like kicking out Omarchy and all these other, cool distributions. And also too, a lot of applications don't need to run natively. They can run as web apps most of the time. Gaming's getting a lot better. I just saw a post on Twitter this week or last week. Epic Games is now even going to figure out how they can get their games to run on Linux because they run anti-cheat software, which is basically kernel malware because it runs at the kernel level, which is wild that Windows users would be totally just next finished. This is running outside the OS layer. And so that's a huge win for Linux. So those are just some examples. And then kind of going into like self-hosting. What does sovereignty mean? Like, it means that you have control over the domain, right? And so I have some examples up here of easy ways to self-host things like your photos, right? Imich, IMMICH is a great photo app alternative. It can do face recognition. It can keep track of where you were on your trips. And you can put it on any device and it backs up to your server because you don't want to lose your photos. Then you have things like Nextcloud, and I just have these up here. Casa OS and Umbrel are kind of like fancy app stores that run Docker containers, but it's like really simple for everyone to install, and it's all done through a web interface, and it's very, very easy. I also run Start OS. I have a Start 9 server. It's awesome. 040 is great. If you're familiar with Matt's work and the people at Start 9, they've got basically an appliance box, which makes it really, really easy to implement sovereignty. This is things like Nextcloud for all your backup of your files and all that fun stuff. And then on the far right is Proxmox, which is a hypervisor. I run Proxmox. It's a little more advanced, but once you kind of go down the rabbit hole, you just kind of want to go like, well, how can I make it better? How can I make it better? Oh, all my family wants to watch the media that I legally purchased on DVDs and burned. Let me fire up a Jellyfin server or Plex or something like that. Those work really well in virtual machines in Proxmox. So these are kind of ways that normally you would pay a service or you would pay cloud hosting to Google or Apple, but now it's bringing it back in, and you want to do this slowly, right? These are just kind of like the highlights. We'll kind of start off easy, like use a password manager, and kind of maybe switch your email over to something that's a little more privacy focused and using multi-factor authentication. So this is what you run on it, right? We got files and photos. So Nextcloud, Imich. NT is great if you kind of like, I don't know if I really want to self-host. Just ente.io. They are end-to-end encrypted backup solution for just photos. That's it. Usually, you get a plan for like $5 a month. So instead of relying on Apple Photos or Google Photos and scanning all your stuff, they're scanning it for the protection of kids. That's what they're going to tell you. But there's so much more. Do they tell you, oh, by the way, we're using all your photos for training data? and our AI models? No, they wouldn't tell you that, but we could assume that they are. It's a massive data. These companies have gone onto the internet and stolen everything. So the idea that they are not going to dip into like their own users' data to train models is insane. And then so we have media notes, Obsidian. I like Obsidian, Notes Nook. There's some good ones. And then for your passwords, right? KeePassXC, Bitwarden's great. You can host Bitwarden if you want to have synchronization with VaultWarden, or you can just pay them. It's like $30 a year. And then Proton Mail, Tuda, people have different opinions, right? I'm not here to force an opinion. I'm just giving you some of the popular options so that you can kind of explore deeper and go like, well, maybe I should. Don't delete your Gmail account. Hold on to it. You don't ever want to lose access to that. But maybe register your own domain name. You can go on Pork Bun, you name cheap. You can get a domain name for $3. Set up a couple MX records, create your own email accounts. You could tie in an email alias service using like a non-daddy or a simple login. And that way, who sold you out. Because you have a unique email address for everything you do online. VPNs, you take them or leave them. I do use VPNs. I like Molvad. I like IVPN. NIM is an interesting one. It's a mixed net. Molvad is experimenting with a protocol called DAITA, which basically creates noise. So your packets don't have peaks and valleys where ISPs or anyone else looking can see signals within they can't see the data, but they can see what type of data it might be. They can see if it's a stream. They can see if it was an attachment. So NIM basically kind of works like Tor, but like on the ClearNet where it's like mixing traffic with other traffic on nodes. And then all the data is going out is just like one constant stream. Molvat has a similar feature with DAITA. It slows it down a little bit. And then Tor, of course, I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with Tor. It's a little slow, but another good option. So these are just kind of, this is kind of like if I was going to start doing things, where would I start? I would start with a password manager and looking at my email, turning off anything you can on your phone, especially location services to apps that don't need them all the time. By default, like they always say, like, can we use your location? And it's like an app that needs your location to use it at the moment, but you don't need them monitoring your location all the time. And then if you're like, okay, this is cool, I'm going to move into trying to get some of my peoples on Signal or SimpleX or whatever messenger you like. Maybe invest into buying some used hardware. You don't need a lot of hardware to run any of this. You could run it on. You might even have old computers in your basement, old laptops laying around, and you could just start playing around with it first. And that's just kind of the start. And then, you kind of start going like full bore, like, okay, I'm going Graphene OS, Proxmox. I'm just going to completely try to remove myself from the internet, essentially. And it happens. It's a slippery slope, So this is kind of the room. If anyone, this will be a good one to take photos. If you're taking photos, this is kind of the rundown as far as the different legislation that's going on from now until January. And I think there's one or two sessions through September before the election, and then pretty much everything's done until January. So this New York Safe for Kids rule binds, that goes into effect January 27th. It's already final. It's already dated. This Ohio law is actually something that's interesting to keep an eye on. This SB 175, and I can't tell you like how fast these things change and how much they pop up. So that's why I just have a running live tracker on the site, because I can't, it's a lot. I mean, this is all happening and like no one's talking about it in the news. No one's talking about it anywhere, but this will impact everybody across the board. And especially at the federal law. So some other useful tips, right? So every mandate on there started in a state, not at the federal level. And the state reps hear from usually single-digit numbers from people in their precincts or districts. So that's really like low numbers. So they're not feeling any pain. They're all feeling the pain on Flock, right? Because that's like in your face. It's tangible. You can see it. A lot of people have Flocks pointed like at their house or a playground, or it just makes you feel very uneasy. This stuff is like happening in the background and they're just not very aware. So legislators are thinking like, well, I guess this is cool. Everyone wants to save the kids, so we'll just pass this. So the earlier, the better. Same with the committees. Whether it's commissioners or the city council, same good people to reach out to. Regarding the Flock cameras, and Yeah, I mean, be specific. Because we don't want to sound like we don't care about kids, right? These laws are, on paper, they look like they have the right intention. Unfortunately, they're going about it the wrong way. It's like, well, 1 out of 100,000 of you are doing something bad, so we need to surveil all of you to find that one person, versus like doing police work and doing investigations. Because now what's happening is all of stuff's being recorded. I don't know if you ever saw like Minority Report, but you're going to have a timeline of everywhere you've been, everyone you were with, where you spent money on. We're moving towards that dystopian kind of environment, and it's a bit scary. So, yeah, the 1856 one is probably a big one to keep an eye on, and that one's coming up in like 2 weeks. And what the language comes out of that. So what I'm looking for in these notes in here specifically is to ban retention. This is a key word. If you're talking to legislators, we want to ban retention. There should be an ID check that's not stored. Verify and return an answer, delete, right? And no inference mandates. So this whole should have known liability forces this continuous profiling, this continuous monitoring, because what the federal inference is basically saying, well, you should have known that user was under 18. How could we have known? Well, you should have known, and now we're going to fine you. We don't know how. We're not telling you how to do it. We're not telling you how to run your business. There's 2 ways to do it: backdoor encryption or on-device scanning. On-device scanning is kind of like this thing that's been thrown around. People get it. Okay, you're scanning my shit on device. But what no one's talking about is that's exactly what AI assistants are. An AI assistant can't be an assistant if it doesn't know everything about you. It knows your email, knows your calendar, knows your photos, knows who your contacts are. It needs to know everything. If you hired an assistant, they need access to your computer and your calendar, right? So the AI on device, and some of them are implemented, some things are done, processed locally, some things are going back to a cloud. And this is kind of like what on-device scanning will look like, right? And then, they're training off that on the back end too and making money off it, which is crazy. So this is kind of like, the DNS checkpoint too. And that's a whole nother thing that we don't have to necessarily get into right now. But the walls are not finished yet. That was kind of the whole point with the door and the house mentality, right? The door is opening, but the walls are not finished, meaning the framework is there in a lot of states for their laws, and it's there federally. But none of the people that are fighting this, Meta, Google, Apple, right, are talking about kids. It's not, all these laws are about the kids, but this is all about money, who's paying for it. And once this stuff is fully implemented and rolled out, we're talking a matter of months, not like years, it's not going to be undone. And Apple and Google have already started rolling this out knowing that this is coming. So, and when I say Apple and Google, I'm talking on everything across all your devices, not just the phone. So iPads and MacBooks and all that fun jazz. And then you have the AI assistants running on top of that. What exactly are they doing? If anybody ran Mac, you ran like different apps that tell you like which apps are running, what servers are connecting to. There's a couple different apps out there. I think, I can't remember the popular one off the top of my head. But the problem is that now AI is going to be doing that. It's just calling home to apple.com, whatever subdomain. You're like, I don't know. I don't know what it's doing. And so it's like, well, is it sending data back about your files or your photos? Like, it's not open source. We have no way to audit. We have no way to check. We just want more like, Siri to work better. So we'll just give up all our information. So in a nutshell, that's kind of the whole thing from the top down, right? As far as where we're at with the laws, where technology is kind of bending and trying to point fingers and say, well, they should do it. We don't want to do that, right? Then you have website operators, social media operators. And I'm just picking out the big ones because those are the ones that are spending tons of money in litigation right now. They're the ones that have more to lose than, like website operators, for instance. But the website operators don't want to do it either. No one wants to do this, but everyone's being forced to because, again, protect the kids kind of a thing. So yeah, I think that's the end of my presentation. I think I got it right at the last second there. Yeah, questions? All right.
So the question, who is actually pushing that? Is it Democratic Party? Is it Republican Party?
Mostly Republicans.
Mostly Republicans.
Yep.
And they do not understand that it's actually nothing else but fraud.
I don't think they care. I really don't think they care. Most of this legislation gets voted on bipartisan, but it comes out of Republican House representatives.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. I think Wyden's probably been one of the biggest ones fighting against it, and he's a Democrat. Yeah.
You probably should spend a few minutes talking about Palantir.
Yes, I thought about putting Palantir in here. It's just like it gets so broad. So Palantir has they're a government contractor, and they are sucking up, hoovering up a lot of this data and selling it back. If everyone remembers the Snowden leaks in 2013, and it blew the lid off all this illegal surveillance, right? So the government can't just go and surveil us all directly, right? They used to have big NSA data centers. They don't need that shit anymore, right? Most people are just feeding it anyways by installing, next, agree, whatever. Yeah, let me use the app. And Palantir is kind of like basically the where it's all feeding to. They're not the only one. Oracle's a big one. There's some other big data brokers out there and fusion centers that we don't even know the names of because they're buried through 3 different shell companies. But this information is being sold and used to make actionable, to do actionable things, kill people, go after people, surveil people. And most of it's done without a warrant. I didn't even get into like FISA, in Section 702, which just got renewed, which is just basically circumvents the Fourth Amendment. If you had a conversation with somebody or within a network, what is it, 7 degrees of Kevin Bacon or something? Like we're none of us that are that far from someone that might be a problem, but that doesn't mean you're a problem. The whole association thing. So you had one, and the thing is, it used to be phone calls. The CIA used to only be able to surveil those calls if it was a foreign entity, but now it's like, well, through association, and Palantir is doing a lot of that for them. And I think they work with I want to say it's 82 countries now too. So and we don't even know that much about how their tools operate and how they work. So yeah, it's a big problem. It's a big problem for sure. Yes, in the tie.
Sorry, let's go here first.
Oh, sorry. In the hat.
From a sort of cooperative standpoint of doing things like self-hosting co-ops and community organizing, what would you say are the tools that are the best to kind of get started with in terms of that?
It kind of depends on your experience level. And I do want to impress upon, because you bring up a good point that I made a note, and these are all my notes, but I'm not going to read all that stuff to you guys, is be the person that can help people, because not everyone's technical and people get quite intimidated by that kind of stuff. But anyone who starts out and, it could just be a Linux server, install Debian, install Ubuntu server, whatever your flavor is, and install Casa OS, install Umbrel. These are open source projects. Once you use one script install, and then you just do everything through a browser, is kind of like the best way to kind of start getting familiar. And they have great app stores. There's community app stores, so you can install a lot of cool servers, but they're all containerized as little apps. It can get a little tricky with routing with Docker. And that's kind of why I like to move to a hypervisor, because everything runs and gets its own IP address, and it's just easy, one port, one IP. That is a little bit more involved, but still fairly easy nowadays. And you're 4 YouTube tutorials from running your own data center at your house, literally. And if you want to run local AI models and stuff like that, even small ones, you can use those and use them for really cool features. There's all sorts of servers out there, Paperless NG and Cirx NG, to run your own search engine. I mean, it would take probably 7 minutes to set up your own search engine and use it by default on your phone, So it's really kind of picking a couple things that interest you, do those things, and then you start going well, shit, I'm just going to start hosting everything, right? Have a good backup solution, test your backups, but even the backups are getting easier, especially if you have a NAS or a USB storage device or something. You can back this stuff up, make a copy of it once every couple of weeks, and keep one at your brother's house, your sister's house, parents' house, somewhere where it's offsite, right? So, you kind of start, back in the day, I don't know how old I look, but I grew up running a Galacticom BBS in high school, right? And later on in life, had zip drives and jazz drives and all these different things, yeah, right? And to store all my MP3s and all this other stuff, my pirated copies of Adobe Photoshop. And, you kind of just get into, burn them to DVD, burn them, and you have backups. So physical media is like super underrated these days, to have, spare drives and back it up, but really just get started, find a couple things. My son loves to download memes off Instagram. So we were just looking for a cool way to do that. And there's like a Cobalt Tools server that you could just open source, install it right on Umbrel, and now he can download the memes that he wants, like the video reels and stuff. And it's using our own server to download it, and then it stores, right? So, it's like you find something that I wonder if there's a way to do that. There is. Run your own XMPP server. That's like S tier as far as comms go, right? That you can like have you and all your friends have clients, there's almost a dozen different XMPP clients that you can use. So you can have instant messaging, and it's all running through your server. The Fourth Amendment does apply to a server in your house, right? The third-party doctrine kind of circumvents the Fourth Amendment once your data goes to the cloud. It's not your data.
I think that's why Hillary Clinton had her server.
Bingo. Not an idiot. She was uniquely qualified to run the empire.
Hi, Simon. I'm Hunter. I also remember the old ways around iOmega and SciQuest and how you could fit a whole 100 megabytes on a single disk.
Yes, sir.
Let's see. Yes. So one thing I don't hear discussed often enough is, by the way, I have 3 items if you don't mind.
Yeah, whatever.
So one thing I don't hear often enough around the age verification laws isn't just that they don't help children. I think they could put them in harm's way. I'm sorry, let me expand on that if you don't mind.
Sure.
When I first heard about, essentially politicians and lawmakers wanting to compel people to embed their date of birth into their operating system, the first place that my mind went as someone who is just kind of unfortunately aware of the shenanigans of pedophiles is they have this concept of age of attraction. And I would think that they would do is send links to people they suspect to be children on platforms like Minecraft and Roblox and Discord for sure. And they'll just like tell the kids to go visit this fun website, and not knowing that, their oblivious parents and the poor unsuspecting children will essentially be at an operating system and application level, be supplying their date of birth, and that will very likely be embedded into databases that will be bought and sold on the dark web of targets by IP address, bucketed by age of attraction, and other nonsense crap that these people like to do. And so I feel like they're not only not just ineffective at protecting children, I think they could also be used in such a way that will be applied to put children in harm's way. And I feel like we don't make that point enough.
I think we don't make that point enough. And I think we also don't emphasize the repercussions for hurting children, because so many of them are let go, and it creates this "it's okay, you can get away with it" mentality. I think it's twofold. I think that there should be more severe punishment for the predatory interactions with kids, and then second to that, if you really want to protect them, don't create these honeypots that you're making. And again, anyone that thinks that any of this stuff is secure is out of their fucking mind. Like, all this stuff gets breached all the time. I mean, we have AIs attacking other AIs. You saw, OpenAI going after Hugging Face a couple of weeks ago. I mean, it's there's no, first of all, there's no regulation in a lot of these areas. And then second, there's no oversight. And then third, there's no repercussion. If anyone in this room hacked Hugging Face, we'd be charged. So, so the onus comes back to who's going to take responsibility for it.
Well, I'll tell you who isn't is the FBI. There's
for sure. I was going to.
There's this known pedophile ring, almost even worse. They're not even just pedophiles. They're like a nihilistic death cult called 764. And they basically, and they're like almost like a terrorist cell. Canada, of all countries, has the balls to call them a terrorist group, but we cannot because domestic terrorists essentially fall into sort of a different legal category that are harder for the FBI to go after for some absurd bureaucratic reason.
Libertarians are a higher priority than 765.
Oh yeah, 764 by the way, and it does seem that the sovereign citizens or whatever are definitely a higher priority on the FBI for sure than protecting children. Another thing that really clarified this for me at least was reading the book Childhood's End by Arthur C. Clarke. They essentially, that book lays it out. Like, there is really no hope in continuing our civilization and our society without protecting children. It's just too bleak. It is the most absurd,
protecting
bleak
women,
ending.
Protecting women, protecting activists, journalists,
Adult
all
human
sorts of
females
individuals who have a higher
women.
threat model than most people. I agree.
Okay, that was number one.
Yeah.
Of three. Okay.
We'll get all in, Hunter. That's fine.
So I have an iOS device, and the options you get are always allow, which, duh, and then allow while using app, which for things like Uber and Lyft, like that makes sense.
Right.
And then is ask app not to track.
Right.
Ask. So I'm curious, how much
That's changing too.
Anonymity set.
Yeah, that's changing too. So the location services, the phone and the carrier network are pretty much going to know where you are most of the time, just off triangulation. But that's, I look at privacy is this concept of like, I'm not trying to be anonymous. I just want to choose what I share and with whom at what time. And so if I need an Uber, I'm going to share my location. I have to. I want the car to pick me up. It's about a mindset. And what happens is it's just kind of retraining your mind, reconditioning your mind. First, just do an inventory of your apps. You might have a dozen apps that you don't even use. Some of those might just also be adware, right? Games and stuff like that are huge for adware. And go look at the app in the App Store. It'll tell you they're supposed to declare what the app collects. And so the fewer apps you have collecting data, the better. I generally just leave everything off. And if I need it, it will prompt you to enable the location service because it's a requirement for the app to work. That's usually the best way. On Graphene OS, you can actually get incredibly granular with your apps and when, like what it can even access outside of location. So network sensors, networking, it does, it rotates your MAC address, it rotates your IP address. You can spoof the device, which is really cool. So there's just a lot of neat security features that are built in. Again, this isn't about being anonymous. It's about limiting the data set that you're putting out there and just basically, this cluster of data that you're spewing. But generally, like location services, I only have weather. And I use an open source weather app that doesn't collect data because I don't want to turn it on every time I open the weather app. I have a widget. I need to know if it's going to rain because that's my biggest thing, right? So yeah.
One more question.
Yeah.
The other day I was searching for flock locations, and while I was searching for flock locations, it was like, download this app, Flock Hopper.
Yeah,
where
don't
you
download
can,
that. Yeah.
Is that
the only one I would
worse than
download?
flock cameras?
Yeah. So because it's a popular topic, a lot of people are jumping on the bandwagon. The one I would use is just dflock. It's just literally called dflock, and you can install it. I think it is in the iOS in the App Store. There's also, if you're using Graphene OS or even stock Android, I recommend installing open source apps directly from the GitHub repos. You can use an app called Obtainium, And in Obtainium, you can say, I want to install, this app from this GitHub repo because it checks the keys that are signed by the developer every time it installs or updates from there on out. If there's a change, it'll let you know. And you can kind of go like, what's going on here? So, but yeah, dflock is the one I would use. And also too, like update it. If there's a flock camera not on there, add it.
Just delete the app, thank you.
Yeah, yes.
By the way, just like somewhat counterintuitively, when there's a checkbox that says "Do not track me," do not check that because that reduces your anonymity set. You're just indicating you'd like to be anonymous. It's a LARP.
It is a LARP. Yep.
So I wanted to mention, you talked about how it's mostly Republicans that are doing a lot of these like the age attestation bills and that sort of thing. I unfortunately think you're right. And I find it interesting because they're sort of playing like, good cop, bad cop. Because I feel like Democrats were overwhelmingly the face of censorship all through COVID. Prior to COVID, they were censoring everyone, kicking everyone off of platforms. And now that everyone's back on the platforms, all the Republicans are essentially pushing, let's collect all the data and let's centralize all this data. And I'm curious if you're familiar with the works of Curtis Yarvin and the Dark Enlightenment that was heavily an inspiration for Peter Thiel and Mark Andreessen, some of these guys. Are you familiar?
I'm not familiar.
Okay.
No.
It's some pretty wild stuff because it sounds really libertarian at first, and then like the more you get into it, there's a quote from Curtis Yarvin. He used to write as Mencius Moltbug, and he's been funded by Peter Thiel. But I believe one of the quotes that he said was, "We're looking for a humane alternative to genocide. We want to essentially put everyone in a digital prison so that we can get rid of the what's the word? The people we're not fans of, essentially. The people we don't like, the undesirables, the eaters. No, they're the lizard people. Peter Thiel is the lizard people.
Zuckerberg is his lizard person.
Yeah. But like Whitney Webb has done a lot of writing on this. And it's just kind of interesting because once you look at that, it felt like the Democrats were like, that was the villain. Trump came in to save us. They pushed all this and it was sort of censorship. Now it's mass collection.
Trump was just asked pointedly about Flock in the last week and was like, "Oh yeah, we'll get an answer back to you in a few weeks." It's just, it is a big club and we're not in it, right? Because they exempt themselves from this surveillance, and it's just two-faced. So
flock cameras around Washington D.C.
yeah.
So I just I have a question about VPNs, but first I want to mention Venice.ai, which is private.
I've used it.
Good
Yeah.
one. But my question is about VPNs. I know Europe is trying to clamp down because at first they wanted to do the ID thing, and then of course they realized people were just going to use VPNs, and they're planning to ban VPNs, I guess. Is there any talk in the U.S. of doing the same thing, or are they just copying?
Yes. Yeah. So it's at the state level about banning. Like Texas is actually trying to do that right now. I know that's one to watch. And I think I have to go back and look because this stuff changes so quick. I think they actually have a draft and something is happening in September and I need to follow up with that. But that is the next move, is to, it's going to be probably one of two things that, they won't be banned, but you'll have to use a KYC to count. Because right now with Mullvad, IVPN, Mullvad specifically, you can mail them cash, right? You can be at a library, go onto their website, generate an account number. That's all it is. Copy it down, mail them cash, literally, or you can pay for it in Monero online, or you can mail it to them, and they'll activate the account, and now you can use it anywhere you want. So they want to get they all of these layers, right? Anything that skips these layers is what they're going to try to legislate. And what will happen is a lot of these businesses will operate in the US, they'll just find them. And then so either A, they'll comply, or B, they'll just shut down, or they might move to another country. But that's kind of like where things are headed right now. I know. Now, you can host your own VPNs. So just because the service providers, again, going away from platforms, protocols over platforms, if it's a protocol, it is, right? You can use, WireGuard or OpenVPN. It's just a tunnel. you could set up a Linux box at Linode for like $5 a month and just SSHD tunnel into it if you wanted to, right? I mean, do it on a server on a VLAN, tunnel all your traffic. I mean, I'm just saying, like, you can't legislate math and technology from existing, and that's what they're ultimately trying to do.
If you haven't, you talked about there's a Utah bill with VPNs coming up. Very curious about that.
Yep.
And then I would also say, so this year in the state legislature here in Colorado, we had Senate Bill 51. That was the age attestation bill.
Right.
And I do a lot of stuff with the legislature, and I didn't pay attention in the Senate. It passed with bipartisan support in the Senate, but then we rallied, and we got so much pressure put on Senate Bill 51 in the House. Every single House Republican voted against the bill. Now, the Democrats have a huge majority that they still passed it, don't get me wrong.
Right.
And if it was coming down to one of those bad Republicans, they probably still would have voted for it. But nonetheless, I think there's some hope that we could potentially, push them on the margins and really fight back against it. But so at least in Colorado, we had some House level representatives in the state legislature who all the Republicans were against it at least. But very curious about the Utah one as well.
Yeah, and I was looking through my notes real quick for Utah because I didn't have the bill in my notes, but I do actually have it up here. And let me see if I can just find it real quick for you. If you guys want, I can actually, let's see.
Your note said it's the one that affects us the most.
Yes. Illinois, Colorado, California. And I haven't updated California. Let's see. Yes. Okay. So in Utah, it's the Accountability Act. It is going to have it goes into effect May 6th of 2027. It's the App Store law. So it's not an OS law, but this is if it's within. I know Texas is Senate Bill 2420. That one was enforced starting January 1st of 2026 this year. And I don't have the bill name, but it's just if you Google search, Brave search, DuckDuckGo, whatever, the Accountability Act for Utah, it requires compliance as of next year. So that means you cannot download an app without being age verified. And that's like if you build your digital house, your walls on your door and everything around open source technology, you don't have to ask permission to install because they'll use terms like side loading. It's like it's just installing an app. We've always just called it installing an app. Stop calling side loading, and just smack anyone who says side load, right? Because they want you to go through the App Store because that's where you're verified. That's where your account lives. But like even on stock Android, but you can just go and install apps, APK files. That's going to be changing though. Google's rolling out changes to that to make it more difficult. You'll still be able to do it, but you'll have to go through a couple steps and you might have to ADB, into the phone. But, it's just, they're going to make it harder and harder. They used to be very open, don't be evil. And now they're just, they're actually going to be worse than Apple. A lot of Google fans have always said like, well, Apple's walled garden and this and that's the other. True. But Apple has done some things that are actually better than any of the other options. They have advanced data protection, which was just kicked out of the UK. They turned it off because UK wanted to surveil everybody. And Apple was like, okay, we'll just turn it off in the UK. We're not going to do that. So advanced data protection does end-to-end encryption on all your backups, everything but contacts, email, and calendar. Those are very difficult to do anyways. But all your photos, backups, notes, health data, everything. Like if you're going to use one or the other, I would either use an iPhone, don't use cloud services, like don't use iCloud, just use your own shit. Or if you're going to use iCloud, just enable advanced data protection. Anyone can do it. No one ever really talks about it. You have to set up a designated person to recover your passkey because Apple doesn't actually have your private keys to unlock your data. So it'd be like a wife or husband or brother, someone you trust that can help you recover in case you forget your iCloud password, because that's the only way you're going to get in. So definitely looking at doing that if you're an iOS user.
We're going to do 3 more questions.
Cool. Yeah.
I'd like to ask questions to the whole auditorium. So, who here believes, like me, that pornography actually cannot hurt kids? Okay, I'm alone here. Okay.
Context.
There's an argument to be had, but it's too broad of a statement.
Yeah.
Okay. I understand, but okay.
Do I get two or just one?
You can do your two and all
Appreciate it. You mentioned mesh networking. I really want to like it, but I also, just from first principles, are a little wary of it because it seems to me if it's done naively, it could de-anonymize your physical location.
All right, so a mesh in reference to like using like a mixed net or something like
No, mesh net, like a mesh networking, like with your radios.
So like Meshtastic, Mesh Core, or something like
or
that.
Reticulum, or
Reticulum,
or
sure.
BitChat, that kind of stuff. Like, Tor is not a mesh network, but
I suppose it could, right? It's going to emit some hardware identifiers for sure, but if there's no digest, there's no central digest for looking that up. Like, it's kind of pointless unless you have a way to.
The ephemeral nature of it essentially makes it harder. Okay.
And I'm also a believer in compartmentalization. So
defense in depth.
Yes.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
Also,
multiple devices for different things. You know?
Yeah. Okay, that too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Also, finally, any concern right now around like quantum resistance and harvest now, decrypt later attacks revolving around sort of like decrypting things that are encrypted with public key cryptography?
So, to a degree, a little bit, but also too from the people I talk to who are significantly smarter than myself, especially who are cryptographers, are not worried about it. So I'm like less worried than I was a year ago. Doesn't mean I'm not worried. I just think that like if it comes to fruition, like my personal shit's probably the least really I need to be worried about in general. Like, you know, yeah, because from the way I understand that it works is it can really problem solve well on one thing, and it's not like you can do it at scale. So if you had the power to wield that, would you go after, you know, encryption protocols or banking or, you know, something that's, I don't know. It's hard to know because we still don't really know exactly if it will ever work.
Well, I'm really curious who you're talking to. I think about it a lot. But yeah.
Zach Collier.
Don't know him.
He developer for Cozy and also another encryption stack for just doing general cryptography, but in a way that I'm trying to remember the name of the other tool. Cozy's the one that he's anyway. He's one of the people. There's other people too.
Probably more a simple thing is where governments want to backdoor encryption. That's probably what they're going to try.
Well,
yeah.
How much is clear?
Yeah.
Thank you.
I mean, I know they'll go after China before they'll go after me. So
Yeah. I just want to add, we're also fastly approaching the feasibility cap for data that we're actually being able to move at one time. We're like 1.6 terabit chassis, like network chassis, just released from Juniper and I think Nokia, and they are so ridiculously hard to cool. They are so ridiculously hard to cool that the amount that you are actually gaining from the individual interfaces is probably not going to be any faster than running 800 gig chassis, just more of them. And we are hitting our feasibility cap with that, and it's going to start capping out what they're able to do. I just wanted to add
interesting. Yeah, never even heard about that.
Okay, so I wanted to ask the last question, but first I wanted to agree with you on the sideloading thing. I feel like IT is always renaming stuff and coming up with fancy terms like hyperconvergence, which is basically just all in one. We don't need a new term for this, so I hate it. But I just wanted to talk about like the legislation aspect. I feel like it's coming at us so hard, so constant. It's everywhere. You know, everything is accelerating so fast that there's probably, at least in the short term, no fight to be won there. And I think, you know, and most of what you were talking about, essentially exit and build. That's like what Derek Rose, he was here a few months ago. He talked about that. But he's talking more about like going out and building a farm, which is also great, but you need to also do this with your digital technology as much as possible. Stop using Google and everything like Google as much as possible, Microsoft, Apple, and start building your own tech. And I think that's the real
and work
answer.
together. Like, you know, especially if you're family members or friends and you trust each other, you know, and you can trust each other, but also still have like secure environments and work together to build your own infrastructure. Especially if someone's got a decent, you know, 3-5 gig fiber connection at the house or something, probably underutilized, you know, put some servers up there and just start experimenting. And then, you know, it can be very fun too and very fulfilling when you see, I mean, normally you look at a computer and you're like, it's just my computer, it's a laptop. But when you see like your home lab equipment, you're like, that's my Nextcloud server. That's where my files are. It's where my photos, you know, it's my media. You know, it starts becoming part of like your lifestyle, I guess. And so it can be fun. Like, I don't want to leave the fun part out, right? There's a lot of good reasons to do it, but it can be also enjoyable. Like learn some new stuff. Yeah, but I agree.
I'll just say I built a server in part for this purpose to host stuff that my friends might need. So if I can help, let me know. I've got unused space and bandwidth. So
Contribute to this campaign.
I'm not a genius with this stuff, but I've learned a lot in the last year.
The
Anyway.
print on the inside of that jacket is awesome, by the way. You should wear it inside out. Yeah.
That's our talk. Give it up for Simon.
Hey, thank you. Thank you.